for fun.
Okay.
Just for something different and to engage my senses a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do short and you could have like a streak in the front.
Thought you were trying to outdo Meg Thompson.
Hello, everybody. We're live on Facebook.
Okay.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Alguien que necesita interpreta para la Junta? Do we have any requests for translation?
No, we don't, President Good.
Thank you. This meeting is being recorded or broadcasted. Images and sounds may be captured of those attending the meeting. And at this point, I would ask for our students to move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, President Good. Again, this video was produced by our students in Gilroy Unified. It represents every school site across our district except for one. Please enjoy.
Welcome everybody. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Bienvenidos a todos. Favor de ponerse de pie para hacer honor a la bandera.
Please rise and remove your head coverings and hats.
Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
And please be seated.
Thank you for that. Next, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is James. I will make that motion.
It's Michelle, second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Geary,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson,
Yes.
James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Paceno.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we have general public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any items or issues within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board that are not listed on the agenda. No action can be taken on any item not on the agenda at this time, but may be referred to the administration to be put on a future agenda. And I understand we do have some public comment tonight.
Yes, we do, President Good.
Please
The
proceed.
the first public comment is from Christy Garrison. I'm asking the district on behalf of our student athletes to follow the state, CIF, and county guidelines for youth athletics, and to follow the guidance of our state and county public health officer in this matter. As of this morning, sports are approved to begin in the purple tier permitted by our state and our county. Sports in the red tier may practice. As you are well aware, California and our county have had the strictest restrictions in all areas of life, including athletics. According to our public health department, these activities are safe to resume following protocol. I would like to take this time to commend our student athletes. District workouts between June and December were reported to have 0 cases transmissions of C19 for both student athletes and coaches. I am thankful for the support of the district, athletic department, and the CHS Booster Club for the extra sanitizing equipment that was provided to us coaches. The rest of the state and county will follow and trust state guidelines. If Gilroy Unified does not, this would imply that our state Department of Public Health and our county public health officer are somehow flawed in their reasoning or data regarding this matter. Lastly, while our case rate is higher in Gilroy than other parts of the county, East San Jose has a nearly identical rate. and they were approved to start conditioning weeks ago. Were this an issue, our PHO would not have allowed this to resume. Therefore, it is deemed safe for us to proceed. Please reinstate athletics immediately per state and county guidelines. Thank you.
The next public comment is from Nathaniel Bates. Given the nature of our public emergency and the need to have teachers and students fully vaccinated before any schools are reopened, may I suggest that once medical experts consider school reopening viable, that the district and GTA sit down and negotiate outdoor education as a safe model. This should be considered when school opening is declared viable by legitimate public health authorities, not politicians or pressure groups. It should be submitted to a full vote of teachers and accepted with a 2/3 majority of all GTA members. When vaccination becomes available to students and teachers, outdoor education, as negotiated by a good faith memorandum between the district and GTA, can allow for the intellect and senses of youngsters to be enhanced in an outdoor setting that lets nature be our teacher. It is safer than indoor education and can serve as a phase in. Wildlife and plants can be our model for biology, while other subjects can have nature as its model. Physics can use catapults and simple machines. English can use nature as an inspiration for poetry. Social studies can emphasize the environment, but more than a phase in, outdoor models should continue even after the pandemic is fully controlled as a form of education that enhances intellectual growth. I call upon GUSD and GTA to jointly agree on this model and for it to pass pending 2/3 of all GTA members and the support of the board.
The next public comment is from Adrian Rodriguez. As a parent and former educator, I'm concerned about the continued in-person closures and the impact on educational equality. Public schools in Gilroy are closed for in-person instruction, yet private schools are open for in-person instruction on hybrid models. These private schools have been offering these models for months with little to no COVID-19 outbreaks. In addition to local private schools, other public school districts and schools in other states and countries continue to educate students safely in person with safety protocols protecting students and teachers. I plead with this board to strongly consider the disproportional impact school closures are having on the students with the greatest needs. If you continue to make decisions based on fear, you are only making the situation even worse for those students and their families. I urge the Gilroy Unified School District Board to consider an immediate plan to reopen Gilroy schools.
The next public comment is from Melissa Vernon. Good evening, Dr. Flores and members of the board. I wanted to say thank you for being very cautious in regards to the reopening of our schools. I appreciate the consideration you've given to the health of our teachers, staff, and students. Opening too soon could have deadly consequences, and it is clear and very necessary you are taking COVID seriously. I hope that you will not rush anyone back to in-person learning before it is safe to do so. Thank you for all your hard work. I know this is not an easy time for anybody.
The next public comment is from Trista Zakowski. Members of the school board and Dr. Flores, I'm a parent to 4 students in our school district, ranging from elementary to high school. Now that the indefinite stay-at-home order has been lifted by the governor, it is my hope and expectation that our district is actively engaging in a plan to get our students back to some form of in-person learning. This current model of distance learning is not working. Parents and teachers are exasperated, and our children are wilting away with no hope of interacting with their peers on the horizon. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, and we are seeing evidence of that through our children's current experience. So many districts in our state and our county have figured out ways to get students back safely in the classroom. We're failing our kids the longer we keep them locked behind the screen.
The next public comment is from Jess Lopez. Dear school board members, I respectfully ask that our high school and middle school sports be reinstated immediately. Our children have suffered enough during this pandemic and are missing out on competing and lifelong memories. For the athletes that wish to pursue a collegiate career, the playtime missed is putting them at a disadvantage in the recruiting department. I respectfully ask that you do the right thing and reinstate our sports programs ASAP. Respectfully, Jess Lopez.
I will read the next 2 comments. The next one is from James Schulte. The area served by the district is on the precipice of meeting the per capita COVID positivity rate set up by the state for relief funding. The infection and death rate is quickly dropping. The latest science proves that the danger to students and teachers is almost non-existent. Our children need to be back in school. Make no mistake, damage is being done. Please open the school. The next public comment is from Blanca Ospina. I love my Gilroy community, from a GTA member.
The next public comment is from David Rubin. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is David Rubin, and I'm a mental health therapist at Christopher High School, Gilroy High School, and Mount Madonna High School. I have worked for GUSD since January 2015, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about GUSD needing to retain the educators it has spent money training, affording students the highest quality education. Unfortunately, the percentage of fully qualified teachers in GUSD has steadily decreased since 2012-13. It is important to pay to increase proportionally with the increase in revenue. We want the best possible educators and mental health staff to help our students be as successful as they can be. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the work you do on behalf of the teachers and students of the GUSD community.
The next public comment is from Shannon DeMello. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of the cabinet. My name is Shannon DeMello, and I teach English 9 and 10, and I'm an EL TOSA at Christopher High. This is my third year teaching with GUSD, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about salary, benefits, and retaining highly qualified teachers. First, thank you so much for listening to GTA's concerns regarding maintaining out-of-pocket health insurance expenses for teachers. It is such a relief, especially during this public health crisis. Second, however, I'm concerned with this commitment to teacher well-being does not extend into the classroom. Over the last few years, GUSD's budget reserve has grown exponentially without growth in investment in the classroom. I would ask you to consider whether having one of the lowest certificated salaries in the county, in addition to one of the highest reserves, benefits the students we are all here to serve. If we truly value our students and want them to receive the highest quality of education, we must invest in fair and competitive salaries to keep and retain highly qualified educators. I appreciate you listening to my concerns and look forward to you working with GTA.
The next public comment is from Elise Wallace. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Elise Wallace, and I'm a first grade teacher at Elliott Elementary. I have worked for GUSD for 3 years, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about the disappointment with negotiations and teacher salaries. I understand there are budgets, but only offering a 2.5% salary increase does not even make up the cost of living in our expensive county. GUSD is one of the lowest paid salaries for teachers in the county, but it has one of the highest reserves. How does having one of the highest reserves benefit our students more than having higher paid teachers in order to retain qualified teachers? Teachers should not have to sacrifice the little paychecks we make to teach in a great community like Gilroy. Please strongly consider a better counteroffer than 2.5% to GTA to show that teachers are worth more than what GUSD has been showing when it comes to our salaries.
The next public comment is from Isabella Tellis. Dear Dr. Flores and board members, I ask that you consider contributing more toward employee health insurance. How can the little guy in the room, the employees, be left with the burden of increased costs of healthcare? How fair is that? How can we discuss reopening the schools when our staff members cannot afford health insurance? Are we not worth a conversation with the providers or health insurance brokers on how we can lower the costs to the employees? I strongly urge you to reconsider the decision on healthcare and support GUSD employees. Thank you from a CSCA member in support of my fellow GTA and GFP coworkers.
The next public comment is from Karina Gonzalez. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Karina Gonzalez, and I am a second grade DI teacher at Las Animas. This is my 4th year working for GUSD. Tonight, I would like to speak about medical benefits. I believe that Gilroy students deserve educators and school staff who receive competitive medical benefits. I was pleased to read that the district negotiated, quote, a counter proposal to cover the increase in cost of health benefits retroactive to January 1, 2020, end quote. According to the letter, that means there will be no additional cost to unit members for the 2020 year. This made me wonder if educator healthcare costs may be increased in subsequent years since they have already been increased in 2021. I am hopeful that Gilroy educators will also be supported with their healthcare coverage in the years after 2020 and 2021. As mentioned in previous board comments, Gilroy educators are facing many uncertainties in our careers, lives, and health matters. I ask that Gilroy educators be supported in maintaining our physical health and mental health. This is crucial to allow us to perform our duties and will ultimately allow us to better serve our students and families in the Gilroy community. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your continued negotiations with GTA.
The next public comment is from Mandy Middleton. Good evening, Superintendent Flores and board members and members of cabinet. My name is Mandy Middleton, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Luigi Aprea. I have worked for GUSD for 12 years, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about my disappointment with negotiations with GUSD. Negotiations began over a year ago at the end of 2019. Several items have been settled, but GTA's main concerns, salary and benefits, still remain unsettled. Until recently, the many negotiating sessions with GTA, the district's negotiating team has failed to make a reasonable offer and to truly arrive at a compromise. As our district's name states, we are a unified school district. I am having trouble seeing any unification. More often than not, it feels like GTA versus the GIAO and the board. When will this mindset end? GUSD students and teachers continue to pay the price for this lack of negotiation. During this pandemic, GUSD teachers have gone above and beyond, particularly this school year. The district has required us to learn numerous new programs and platforms such as Parent Square, Zoom, Pear Deck, and Google Classroom, just to name a few. We have also had to learn new science curriculum at the elementary level. Most of us are sitting in front of a screen for a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day. Parents expect us to be available at all times now. We are among the lowest paid teachers in the county. We deserve a livable salary and competitive benefits. Please consider a valid compromise for your hardworking teachers.
The next public comment is from Carol McDonald. Good evening, my name is Carol McDonald and I have been teaching here for 15 years. I wish to address the topic of compensation. The word negotiation implies a willingness to compromise. Unfortunately, the district hasn't been willing to negotiate on the topic of salaries in all the years I've been here. Rather than, okay, let's talk about this, their habit over the last 15 years has been to say, no, there is no money, over and over again until the unions are fed up enough to threaten a strike. This is not negotiating, it's called stonewalling. Let's tell it like it is. We have been without a contract for a year and a half while the district sits on a huge pot of money. Now, I'm happy to say there have been some changes since the last negotiation meeting. The governor has announced that the state will make a 2.65% cost of living adjustment to the district's budget for this year. It would be criminal not to pass a COLA on to the people. So I'm greatly relieved to hear that the district offer an increase of 2.5%. However, I question why the increase is lower than the state is paying the district while the district can afford more. I still think we can and should do better. Last summer, we were offered a one-time bonus for the extraordinary efforts required to switch to remote learning. Dr. Flores keeps saying that she is so proud of us. Today, that bonus for our extraordinary efforts has been taken off the table. Unfortunately, nice words don't pay the bills. You see, it's all sneaky semantics. The state is paying us a cost of living adjustment, which the district takes credit for. Meanwhile, the district takes back the bonus we were promised and losses in something toward medical benefits. We earned a bonus for changing to distance learning, but the district is taking that back. It sounds to me like they haven't made any compromises at all. Listen, colleagues, we are better off getting a salary increase than medical benefits or bonuses. Medical benefits are tax deductible and they won't improve your retirement benefits. Only salary determines how much we are paid in retirement. Higher salary today means more money actually in our pockets, both now and in the future. Salary is the key for all stages of life. Every year, an enormous amount of time and energy is spent on training new teachers. Every year, more and more teachers leave for other districts that will pay them better. It's time to staunch the hemorrhaging of money and talent and give qualified teachers an incentive to stay and work here in our community. Thank you.
The next public comment is from Cynthia Duran. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Cynthia Duran, and I'm a DI Kinder teacher at Las Animas. I have worked for GUSD for 7 years, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about salary. A fair and competitive salary helps to recruit and retain highly qualified educators. I was raised here in Gilroy with amazing teachers that inspired me to teach, such as Mrs. Gurashini and Mrs. Castro. I would like to continue teaching here in our district because teaching is my passion. However, housing costs have increased substantially. Now more than ever is a time for educators to have an increase in salary. We are in a pandemic. What has the pandemic caused? Instability and economic uncertainty for everyone. This, in addition to inflation and the continually increasing cost of living in Gilroy, make it very difficult for a teacher to survive in this community. Educators need a decent increase in order to continue teaching in this district. This problem will not finish soon after we get the vaccine. It will take years to recover the economy. I appreciate you listening to my concerns, and I look forward to you working with GUSD.
The next public comment is from Melissa Wadsworth. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Melissa Wadsworth, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Luigi. I have worked for GUSD for 23 years. I am saddened to see that we are at this juncture again. Teachers have risen to the challenge time and again, but when we ask for a fair wage, we are rebuked. While we have had a few increases since 2013, they have not kept up with the cost of living or salaries in other districts. We are continually the lowest paid in the county, and yet administrators are among the highest. Our district loses about 16% of teachers every year to other districts. It is time to keep our teachers in GUSD so our students can reap the benefits. Please show teachers that you value them and their commitment to the students of Gilroy Unified.
The next comment is from Caitlin Felice Holler. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Caitlin Felice Holler, and I'm an English teacher at Gilroy High School. I have worked for GUSD for 3 years. I would like to begin by thanking you for prioritizing the safety of teachers and families by continuing remote learning, and for prioritizing the health of teachers by maintaining medical benefits for GTA members. My main focus tonight is to speak to you about educator salaries. Gilroy teachers are among the lowest paid in Santa Clara County and also earn less than teachers in surrounding districts with significantly lower cost of living, including Hollister, Salinas, and even Los Banos. Low salaries result in new teachers using GUSD as a stepping stone or training ground to complete induction and gain experience before moving on to higher paying districts, which is one reason why GUSD or Gilroy Unified has the lowest percent of highly qualified teachers in the county. Gilroy students deserve highly qualified teachers who are paid a fair salary that allows them to live in the area and return to GUSD year after year as they build relationships and improve their practice. Gilroy Unified can help ensure the best education for students by prioritizing teacher salaries and paying educators a fair wage that will attract and retain excellent teachers. GUSD's educators are its most valuable resource, and the district's investment in them should reflect that. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to you working with you, GTA.
The next public comment is from Cynthia Gonzalez. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Cynthia Gonzalez, and I'm an ELD and English language arts teacher at Gilroy High School. I worked for GUSD for 9 years, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about salary. I am very saddened by the fact that GTA was practically forced to go into impasse. It has been 10 months of negotiations, most of which have been without any movement from the district until last month. Needless to say, the district's proposal was insulting to educators of this district. The current proposal of 2.5% would move a teacher in step 1 of the salary scale from $53,849 to $55,195. That's a $1,346 increase, not even enough to pay 1 month's rent. GUSD students deserve educators who make a living wage. We have so many talented young teachers who cannot afford to live in our area. That is very unfortunate for our students because our students are the one who miss out on the opportunity to see their teachers passionately focusing on teaching and not how they are going to pay their bills. GUSD needs to retain the educators that have spent money affording students the highest quality education. At every board meeting, the financial report always mentions that salaries are the highest percentage of expenditures. The last report stated that 86% of the money spent was on salaries. Let's not forget this is only teacher salaries, but this also includes management salaries. But why shouldn't salaries be your biggest investment? You have seen during distance learning what teachers are capable of doing from their own homes. Academically, our students have continued to receive the highest quality education because teachers have gone above and beyond from their homes, creating lessons and learning new skills. I really hope that you really reflect on how teachers are your most valuable resource. Show us how much you value us with a decent proposal. Thank you for your time and attention.
The last public comment is from Jessica Tyler. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, board members, and members of cabinet. My name is Jessica Tyler, and I'm a teacher at Solar Sauna Middle School. I have worked for GUSD for 6 years, and tonight I wanted to speak to you about salary and negotiations. I was very happy to hear that GUSD agreed to maintain our health benefit premiums so that we don't have to pay more during this uncertain time. I am also concerned, I am still concerned that this will not be enough to retain some of our highly qualified and beloved educators. Distance learning has taken a significant toll on our profession during a time when there already was a teacher shortage. I urge the district to keep these things in mind as we continue to work together to reach an agreement. This concludes public comment.
Thank you. Next, we have item number D, report of action taken in closed session. The board approved 2 settlement agreements to resolve student educational claims. All 7 trustees, Aguirre, Diaz, Fiac, Good, Nelson, Pace, and Pacino, voted yes. And that concludes the items that were taken action on in closed session. Next, we have student board member report. Catherine Yambo.
Hi, my name is Catherine Yamba, and I will be presenting off of South Valley and Gilroy High School. So South Valley Middle School will be first. On October 23rd, they did hold a movie night. This was organized by ASB, and at 5 p.m. they did watch the movie Caroline. This past coming week, they did recognize the honor roll students from last semester. So this was anyone who got a 3.0 to 3.9 got honor roll, and then a 4.0 received principals list. And this year they did start a new Tiger Way Award. So during these times, they did give out this award for anyone who demonstrated grit. So anyone like besides the circumstances who did persevere. And the certificates were mailed out as of this week. Another thing they implemented this year is called Tiger Time. So this is twice a week during their 8th period class. Students get to meet with other teachers and students to interact. This is a time to focus on social and emotional learning. So it's really about self and time management, how they can focus on their emotions and dealing with time at home. They always have objectives and then activities they get to do with other students. This was one of our first, or one of their many counselor meetings with the 8th graders had with their counselors. They talk about high school and they check in on their graduation requirements, and pretty soon they're going to talk about what classes they are planning to take. So they also do have ASB. This is a weekly meeting during Tiger Time where they get to set up weekly announcement and spirit days. And this is just one of the examples of stuff they do. South Valley also does have a school-wide Google Classroom where they do post announcements. So Spirit Days. So this is also organized by ASB, and they do have Spirit Days about once a month. So they've had Pet Day, Ugly Sweater Day, and here is Wear Your Pajamas. Something that is coming up for South Valley is the student store. So this is a new t-shirt design that they've had. Another thing that is new, the Tiger Way that I talked about earlier, if students do demonstrate this trait, they do get to earn something called like Tiger Bucks. So it's where students get to spend this money on like mechanical pencils or just small items from the student store as well. And then now Gilroy High School. So something we've continued from last semester is our Mustang Media. So this is our new way that we show announcements. So every week, ASB students read the announcements and they also talk about activities coming up. The ASB board do edit and they post these videos on Instagram. Our calendar of things. So this happened during the month of November, obviously because of Thanksgiving. We were just posting stuff that students could do to just random acts of kindness, such as like thanking a parent or grandparent, spending time with family. Our hand turkey contest. So this happened on November 22nd. Students did get characterized into the most realistic turkey, mixed media, and the most realistic hand. Winners did receive gift cards donated by Parent Club. Our students of the week or month, this started towards the end of last semester. So these students are nominated by staff every week, and then we post them on our social media, on Instagram, and on our Mustang Media weekly announcements. So our ornament contest, this was just like the hand turkey one back in November, but this happened in December. And the categories were most creative and the funniest. And winners did get gift cards that were donated by Target. Instead of just posting informational stuff on our social media, we did decide to post games. So these are guess who's from students and from teachers, where baby pictures were submitted and students just got to guess which student they thought these were. Our choir concert happened on December 11th. So normally Mr. Souza and the chamber members do caroling during the holidays, but since that wasn't available, Mr. Souza put a video together of their previous performances and posted it. The Takamachi virtual tour happened on December 15th. So normally we do have these Japanese students with us, but instead they did a Zoom session and the Americans they both got to play games together, and we showed them our houses and what was the difference between here and in Japan. And they just found it curious how, since we have like Costco, we have stuff in bulk, whereas they don't really have that stuff. So that was just an interesting thing. And then on the 16th, 17th, and 18th, we did have finals. The Mustang Wellness Center was a website created during December break by Mr. Leong. So here there's phone numbers, there's workout, meditation, tutoring, puzzles. It's just a variety of getaways that students can always go to, and this is linked on the Gilroy High School page. On January 7th, there was the Dual Immersion Information Night. So this is for all the middle schoolers who are planning to continue doing dual immersion into high school. They covered what GI was about, and they showed them a schedule of what their classes would look like in high school since it is different. There also was a class presentation mixed with our current DI students at Gilroy High School, and there was a turnout of 86 families. There was a winter rally on January 8th that was posted on Instagram. There was games such as Skittles and Chopsticks, and kids tried to knock down cups. And there was a tug of war with Mr. Chavez and Mr. Pierce, as well as our performances by band, choir, and the cheerleaders. So since our senior year is kind of coming to an end, we were pushing out getting our senior quotes in, our senior video, and our senior songs on our Instagrams. Class shirts. So all of the classes designed their class shirts in first semester, but the freshmen were on hold, and now they will hopefully continue to resume ordering and passing out their t-shirts. And these are just some of the designs. Our student site council meeting happened on January 12th. So this is always there was a turnout about 24 to 28 families attending the monthly meetings. For this one, they were approving the GHS safety plan. So this had to do for emergency protocols and procedures in case there was a natural disaster such as an earthquake. So last week we did have our honor roll recognition. So this is for everyone who got a 3.0 and above first quarter and in first semester. They did receive prepackaged Oreos in either a popsicle or a drumstick. And this was organized by Parent Club, Rotary Club, and ASB. So Mustang Mania happened just last night. So this was for all our middle schoolers and incoming freshmen. They did go over the graduation requirements. They got a campus tour, and they were performances by band, choir, and FFA. And last but not least, we do have Link Crew. So once a month, they do have activities with their freshmen. So last night's was the 2000s. So they had to guess like some stuff that happened in the 2000s on Kahoo. And then coming up for Gilroy High School, we do have the Creative Writing Club contest, the Crochet and Knitting Club, and more activities organized by ASB, such as more bingo, trivia, and student staff appreciation. That's going to be posted on our Instagram. And that is it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Excellent and comprehensive report. Next, we have Superintendent's report. Dr. Flores. You're muted, Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Good. I had the pleasure in the last 2 weeks of making a presentation to both of our Rotaries in Gilroy, the Noontime Rotary on January 19th and the Sunrise Rotary on January 26th. And I shared with them a presentation about distance learning and about all the things that we've done since March as a result of the shelter in place. And I thought it was well received. They asked some really good questions, and Melanie assisted me with the presentation. I think I sent you, or I'm going to send you my report, the presentation, but I thought it went very well. On Inauguration Day, I think most of the district was watching the inauguration, from district office staff to the classrooms. So it was quite a momentous day and some really great performances, particularly the student poet. She was amazing. Our reopening planning committee met on January 21st, and I'll be talking about our thoughts later during this board meeting. And the following day, we had a staff development day with lots of great activities for staff. And I know that the surveys afterwards indicated that the workshops were very helpful. Believe it or not, the 27th was the 100th day of school. I can't believe that already. It just feels like, you know, August was a few days ago. But anyway, the 100th day of school, and lots of the schools participate and do some really fun things. I thought that t-shirt was so cute. I don't know if you can read the words, but it's really cute. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow is the annual Superintendent Symposium. Normally it's in Monterey, and we all go to Monterey, and great location for a great conference, but unfortunately this year we couldn't, so it is virtual. And I've attended some really interesting workshops, as I do every year. My favorites are always the top finance people attend our symposium. We get to hear from them directly and of course pick their brains. So school services was there, capital advisors, AXA, talking about the budget and what it means, next year's budget. That was great. There was a workshop on the impacts of COVID-19 on employees. But by far the most interesting thing that's happened, I think, in it, I've been going to these 20 years plus, the governor attended our superintendent's symposium today. That has never happened in my whole time as a superintendent. Of course, it was virtual, and Wes Smith, our AXA executive director, asked him a series of questions, and obviously I can't tell you everything that he said, but one of the most interesting points in this dialogue back and forth was about vaccines, and I just was fascinated with this dialogue that went back and forth. And as you know, the governor is pushing districts to reopen schools, and one of the questions had to do with the role of vaccines in that decision to reopen schools. And Wes Smith was raising some of the issues that superintendents all over the state are raising about the idea of vaccinating all employees in every school district in the state, including the cost. And the governor actually got frustrated at one point and made a statement along the lines of, well, if school districts are waiting for vaccinations of staff to occur, then they won't be opening this year. And that was a really interesting comment. So I understand he's frustrated, but so are we. But to assume that districts are going to spend already the funds that are stretched so far to ensure that all staff and students or staff are vaccinated, that's just unrealistic. So there are a lot of other interesting comments. I'm sure they're going to be in the newspaper tomorrow. I'm sure you'll get to read them yourself. But I do appreciate that he came to talk directly to 300-400 superintendents that were at this conference. As you know, I've been doing Friday letters to parents and staff. So I did do a letter on the 15th, and we're due to do one coming up. We've continued our APS visits, and we went to El Roble and Elliott. And it's all, of course, it's always interesting to be able to, even though it's virtual, the Ed Services team and I drop into classrooms. And on those two visits, our new board member, Michelle Nelson, joined us. We appreciate that Michelle wanted to know what's going on in classrooms and asked if she could join us. So we welcomed her to the visits. Hopefully it was really enlightening for her. But as I continue to say, and it's very genuine when I say it, is I just am so impressed. In fact, I said the same thing to Rotary, both Rotaries, is the great job that our teachers are doing in probably the most challenging environment that you can even imagine for a classroom teacher to engage their students. You know, there's so many challenges in this environment, and yet they are doing the job. Children are learning. The standards are being addressed, textbooks and all the resources that go along with them are being used. There's just so many good things going on in the environment. And I think most students are really benefiting from the way this is structured. Of course, we'd all love to be back in the buildings, but I think our staff are just doing a great job. And most of the students were very engaged. I know that is an area that has been particularly challenging in this environment, is how do you make sure all 24 or 30 of your students are engaged, and they're using a lot of different strategies to try to address that. We have our middle school visits coming up, and those are going to happen on February 2nd, 4th, and 9th. And then I'll transition to my spring site visits, which, as board members know, they are welcome to join me on the spring site visits. We've continued superintendent's meetings every Tuesday afternoon with public health and the EOC. department, and those have been really helpful. And we have a lot of other meetings coming up, like our facilities subcommittee meeting and principals meeting, non-site management, and SPAC is coming up, our Superintendent Parent Advisory Board. And we do have a week off, February 15th to 19th, and we really can call it ski week now after 6 to 8 feet of snow in the Sierra. It's great. And one of my favorite events is March 2nd, Read Across America, which we're coming up with some creative ways to do that this year. And by far my favorite event of the year, our Run for Fitness, which we are going to do virtually this year. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Mr. Good, you're muted.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to call the consent agenda, and I'm going to call item 6E out of order. I believe the superintendent has some comments on that.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Good. I think you'll recall at the last board meeting, I gave a short report on the transition of fiscal agents for CalSOAP. As you know, CalSOAP's been a program in our district for many years, almost 20 years, provides wonderful services to students in our district and 3 others. And those students are able to, as a result of the services they receive, go to college. And due to the rising cost associated with the program continuing with us as a fiscal agent, another fiscal agent was sought. And as you know, I told you last month, that is Rebecca Children's Services, who I think will do a great job as the new fiscal agent. There's been a series of meetings, and this transition cannot be accomplished by March 1st. It's more likely going to be the transition will occur in early April. And so I checked with our legal counsel to see if that would be possible to amend this consent item tonight, and she indicated that we could. So I'd like to read what we would like to recommend. And that is, it's recommended that the GUSD Board of Education approve staff's recommendation to amend the effective date of the change of fiscal agent from March 1st, 2021 to a date in April to be set by the superintendent in consultation with Rebecca's Children's Services. We don't know the exact date yet, but we have a number of tasks that are being accomplished, and actually a long list that have to occur before this transition results. So we're requesting that you approve this recommendation.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the amendment proposed by Dr. Flores in 6E.
Move to approve. This is Michelle.
This is Linda, second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Aguirre,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson.
You're muted,
Sorry.
Michelle.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Pisano.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item 7A, update on district's preparations for the reopening of schools when conditions permit it. Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Good. I have some opening comments I'd like to make before I proceed with the PowerPoint, which has a number of slides in it. So it really is my pleasure to be able to provide this update tonight to the board, staff, and everyone who's watching the board meeting. Understandably, there's much interest in the topic of reopening schools, not just here in Gilroy, but in districts across the state and nation. I also know that there are many different opinions about if and when schools should reopen, and I ask that we agree to respectfully disagree. The safety of our students, staff, and families has been our top priority throughout this process, and will continue to be the most important factor in our decision-making process. When the county made the decision on March 13th, 2020 to implement a shelter-in-place order and to close all schools in the county, we never imagined it would last almost a year. I don't think any of us could have predicted what's happened over this past year. Literally overnight, we converted our operations from brick and mortar buildings to working from our homes to continue providing the full range of services that the district has always provided. The transition to distance learning has had its challenges, especially last spring when the conversion happened literally overnight. But thanks to the hard work and dedication of our staff, distance learning has worked well this year, and it gets better all the time. And I see those steady improvements as I visit classrooms virtually each week. In May, I formed a planning committee to advise the district and the board about issues related to the school closures, to help the district prepare for reopening schools and to make recommendations about the reopening. The reopening planning committee is comprised of 30 individuals that represent all bargaining units and hold various positions in the district, and some are also parents in the district. Later in the presentation, I will share their recommendation regarding reopening schools. I want to thank the committee for their time and willingness to attend so many meetings since last May. They are a very dedicated group of people, and I'm so grateful for their help in this process. Our planning committee, district leadership team, and the board are data-driven. The COVID-19 data, particularly for Gilroy, has to have a prominent role in our decision-making process. Gilroy has had the most COVID-19 cases of any city in the county. There have been 6,559 cases of COVID-19 in Gilroy, a rate of 11,813 per 100,000, which is the highest in the county. Gilroy's cases represent almost 7% of all the cases in the county, and yet we only have about 3% of the county's population. Gilroy's case rate is almost twice as high as the next two highest cities, Morgan Hill and San Jose. Also, we just learned yesterday that there have been 40 deaths in Gilroy, which is one of the highest among the zip codes. My heart goes out to the families and friends of those Gilroy families who have lost a loved one, and to over 1,300 families in our county who have also lost a family member. I also express my support for our staff who have tested positive, exhibited COVID-19 symptoms, and/or have had to quarantine due to someone in their household testing positive or sick. Since Thanksgiving, there have been almost 60 cases in the district. I'm going to start my presentation, and I'm going to go through about 10 slides on COVID-19, again, because we're data-driven, and these are the kinds of slides that the committee has reviewed. I want to thank two of our board members for providing some of these slides, James Pace and Enrique Diaz. They've been a big help to us as they've been tracking Gilroy's data since the beginning of the pandemic. And I also want to thank one of our planning committee members, Janet Lee, who is a science teacher at Gilroy High, for sharing the data about deaths. And after I go through the slides about COVID-19, I'm then going to share slides and talk about the requirements that were recently released from the California Department of Public Health for reopening schools, and discuss tasks being undertaken to prepare for reopening and present the committee's recommendation at this point. I'll share a few comments about the governor's Safe Schools plan. Next slide. So I don't know how many of you go on the county's COVID-19 dashboard. I go on it a couple of days a week now. I was for a while going on it every day. I know other people in our organization do the same. So this is what you would see if you went on the dashboard. There's been almost 100,000 cases of COVID-19 in our county, and the 7-day rolling average, which is one that I particularly focus on, is 893. That means over the past 7 days, on the average number of new cases was 893. and the cumulative COVID-19 deaths is 1314. Next. If you, on the dashboard, you can also go to a section that tells you case rates in cities, and you just click on the city and you get a little box like this. As I mentioned, our case count is 6,559, and our rate per 100,000 is 11,813. Next. This is a great way of displaying the number of cases and what's happened, and this is as of January 1st, how many the rise in cases in Gilroy. Next. I like this slide because it compares the percent infected in the United States, California, and Santa Clara and Gilroy, and the red line is Gilroy. So as you can see, the percent infected is higher in Gilroy than in the United States, California, or Santa Clara County. Next. This slide shows the rates by city, which is what I mentioned earlier. It's a great way of displaying. The first on the left is San Jose. The second is Gilroy. As you can see, it's almost twice San Jose's, and to the right is Morgan Hill. And then all the other cities are much lower in our county than Gilroy. Next. This is the 7-day average of cases per 100,000, which the county has been relying on. And as you can see, Gilroy is the purple up above. It is dropping, thankfully, finally, in both the county and Gilroy, but we still have a lot of new cases per day, which is what that graph shows. Next slide. I think it's important to look at the deaths by age group. I know this is a difficult subject to talk about death, but as you look at the age groups, you see that the percentage of deaths increases with age. The reason that's relevant is because of the number of staff that we have that are 60 and older. And I'd like to show you a chart. That's the next one. And over on the right are staff that are 60 and older, and there are about 150 of them. And I think that's a really important consideration when we talk about reopening schools. Next slide. This is cases by age group under 18. If you don't know it, about 18% of the cases in the county are under the age of 19, under the age of 19. And this shows you the breakdown by age. I hear lots of people say to me, well, very few kids get COVID-19. I think this chart demonstrates that statement is not true for Gilroy and for our county, because remember, we have a certain percentage of those, assuming that the ratios work in our city. Next slide. I also like to follow what's happening nationally with the number of cases of COVID-19 in children. There's a great site that you can get on the left, the number of total cases of COVID-19 in children in the US, which is almost 2.7 million, and it's 12.7, almost 13% of all cases are in children. And that rate per 100,000 is 3,556. And what was interesting to me is the first 2 weeks of January, there was a 16% increase in the number of children getting COVID-19. I couldn't get the same data for California, but I could find, ironically, and I checked this 3 times, the number of cases of COVID-19 in California as of yesterday, today, the 28th, I looked this morning, was over 400,000, and that also was 12% of all cases. Also of interest is there's this new illness that seems to be related to COVID-19, and I was surprised to learn that 150 California children have been diagnosed with it, and sometimes it can be very serious. And so these are the stats here. So that's just the data, and I wanted everyone to see there are hundreds of other charts I could have shared with you, but just try to focus on some of the data to put things in context. 2 weeks ago, the California Public Health Department released a new document called Framework for Reopening. The title is COVID-19 and Reopening in-Person Instruction Framework and Public Health Guidance for K-12 Schools. There's 50 plus pages in this report, and I want to highlight some of the pages because this report supersedes the 2 prior reports from our county public health department. Now districts are required to follow the guidance in this document, and we've had less than 2 weeks to study the document, but I've been in several meetings where the elements of this document have been discussed. And there are some really critical components of this document that affect our ability to reopen schools. So I want to talk about some of those. Next slide. So the document has a chart that talks about the tiers. As you probably heard, the stay-at-home order has been lifted, but our county, as well as most counties in California, are in the purple tier. And as long as we're in the purple tier, school 7-12 students, grade 7-12 cannot reopen until the case rate is below 7, which would mean we'd be in the red tier if that happened. So 7th to 12th grade cannot reopen in the purple tier. K-6 is a different story. In the guidance, if the case rate in the county is below 25, then elementary schools can reopen. But there are many other provisions in the report that have to be considered, and I'm going to call those out in just a minute. The county's case rate, as you saw earlier in the chart, is dropping, and it could potentially drop below 25 anytime in the near future. But we're going to make a specific recommendation regarding that case rate in our recommendation from the Reopening Planning Committee, and I'll get to that soon. So just remember, in the purple tier, 7th through 12th cannot reopen. K through 6 can only reopen if the case rate's below 25. Next slide. And this just is a narrative in the report that states what I've just said to you, but I wanted you to actually see the narrative. Next slide. In the report, there are numerous infection mitigation strategies or layers of safety that the district has to implement. And so I want to highlight some of the areas that we will need to focus on. And again, we've been planning since May. Our committee has been meeting since May, and we have many protocols in place already for these 9 topics. But there were some changes in this report from the California Public Health Department. So in the category of face coverings, in the prior reports from our county, face coverings, for instance, in the first one weren't required for TK through second. This report requires all students and all staff, TK-12, all staff, unless there's an exemption, and those are very limited due to, for instance, medical conditions like asthma. In the absence of that, all staff and all students have to wear masks. They are requiring that staff wear disposable 3-ply surgical masks, in other words, not their own mask, which is an added expense for the district. Well, we are going to be ordering thousands of 3-ply surgical masks. So that's a change in this report. And the stable groups, we have always heard the requirement that elementary students be in groups throughout the day together with the same teachers and even specialists that are assigned to individual groups. And at the middle and the high school, they're recommending that several different ideas. Stable groups, just as at the elementary level, with teachers moving, or block schedules where we reduce the number of classes, and again, stability of teachers, electives virtually, and in this report, it would allow band, choir, and theater, but our county's guidance on those is much stricter, and the stricter prevails, so those are still prohibited by our county. The physical distance requirements are for everyone, staff, students, everyone. So when we looked at classrooms and started trying to figure out how to have six feet distance between student desk and teacher's desk, we very quickly reached the conclusion that we could only place about 10 to 12 desks in a classroom. And obviously that limits the number of students that you can have at school on any given day. So the requirement in this report is that they be 6 feet apart. They recommend that we use outdoor spaces, partitions, that we limit or prohibit volunteers and activities from the outside, that we minimize congregate movements like an entire group of students moving in the hallway, that we stagger start times and have one-way directionals, that meals be outdoor, and that we limit sharing of objects. So there's some changes there. Ventilation has become a high priority for the California Public Health Department and our county's public health department. Alvaro Mesa, Dan McAuliffe, and I attended a webinar a couple months ago where they made it very clear what their expectations were for school districts, and that was to hire outside experts who are trained in the assessment of HVAC systems, and that we literally assess every HVAC system in the district, because the importance of air quality and circulation of the air has become more prominent than it was in the early days of the reports we were receiving from public health. So we moved very quickly as a district. We hired a team of experts. We're very proud that we did that, because now districts are scrambling to find the experts to do these assessments. And it started in December, and we have finished the one high school, and we're almost done with the second high school. Of course, those are our largest buildings. And then we're going to move on and do the 7 elementary schools. But based on the number of HVAC systems that we need to assess and then potentially repair, there are 1,200 of them, by the way. We anticipate that this is going to take a few months to complete. They also recommend that we keep windows and doors open and use fans to blow air out of the classroom. And we've already taken steps on the fans, and we've also purchased some HEPA filters for classrooms that were unable to provide adequate ventilation. There was a big change in this report on hand hygiene, which surprised all of us. But because there's been such an intense focus on disinfecting from the outbreak of this COVID-19, now they have reached the conclusion that all those disinfectants are bad for kids and staff, and they've recommended districts not use disinfectants as much as we've been using them, and that we just clean with soap and water and detergents that are not harmful to kids. So we're still working our way through that section of the report, but obviously we're going to have to make some big changes. We had ordered thousands of dollars of disinfectants and hand sanitizers that they're now telling us not to use. So we still have some work in these 2 sections to determine what are the best ways to keep children and staff safe with these big changes in these categories about hand hygiene and cleaning and disinfecting. We've worked a lot already. I'm in the health and wellness subcommittee of our planning committee, and we have 2 nurses on that committee, and it's a great committee. We've been working hard from the beginning on procedures for students when they arrive on campus, for procedures for what to do when a student potentially exhibits the symptoms of COVID-19 while they're at school. And so we already have developed some really good protocols for how to deal with these kind of situations that might arise at school. And those are ready to go whenever we return. And we've also worked on a lot of HR procedures. Dr. Winslow's in charge of dealing with cases that are reported to him and which ones have to be reported to public health. and procedures for dealing with staff that are quarantined for 10 or more days. And then the last category is, and we're ready to do some of this training when we get ready to return, training for staff, students, and parents on procedures, protocols, how we're going to do this safely. These are all outlined in great detail in the report, and we provided the link for this, and we'll provide it again on our website so that anyone that wants to link to the actual report, in fact, I'd encourage you to link to the report, because it really is our prescription for how to prepare for returning to school. And then the next slide. I wanted just to show you that this is what a classroom would look like with all the desks 6 feet apart. And as you can see, there are very limited number of desks, 10 or 12 desks in a classroom. And we're actually doing this at our distance learning access centers, which we've been operating since the fall for students that have no internet connectivity. And it can work, but it requires an incredible amount of staff to keep everyone safe. So this is going to be one of our biggest challenges whenever we return to the schools. Next slide. There's a whole section in the report about additional reopening considerations. So one of their recommendations is that we continue distance learning for families and students that request it, and that we phase in whatever we do. So whenever we return, that we phase it in, that we don't bring all students back at once, but that we phase it in so that we switch from the full distance learning model, for instance, to a hybrid model, or we allow certain grades to come, like the early grades to come back first, or a certain percentage of grades to return. Obviously, we know we're not going to have all students back because we can't house them in the classrooms like we used to. And there were different suggestions in this section on how to phase in. And I'm happy to report that our Teaching and Learning Committee has been talking about these various scenarios for months. And certainly we'll be ready when the time is right and when the conditions are right to make some very specific recommendations about that. Next slide. I mentioned this earlier, we've had a planning committee meeting since May, and there's 30 people on the committee, and they represent a lot of different roles. And I'm just so appreciative to the committee because they've really worked hard on this. They've deliberated about a lot of topics over these many months now, and they've reviewed a lot of reports, articles that I send them, data that I show them. So they've done a lot of work. So I really appreciate them greatly. Next slide. And we have had a planning committee, as I mentioned, since May. Those are the dates that the whole planning committee has met. On some of those dates, we break up into subcommittees after the full meeting of the full committee. And those are the 3 subcommittees that we've had meeting all these months. And sometimes we've had meetings separate from the full planning committee meeting out of necessity because there's so many topics that we've had to discuss in all these months. Next slide. Before our schools can reopen as outlined in the report, we do have to develop and submit what's called a COVID-19 safety plan, CSP, to the Santa Clara County Public Health Department. We'll need to consult with various groups like our unions and parent committees. And then of course, I'll bring that plan to you, the board. And once that's approved, we have to post a plan on our website and on each school's website. And of course, we'll be happy to do all of that. Next slide. I do want to just say one word about or a few words about the Governor Newsom's proposal, which he released a couple weeks ago called Safe Schools for All. And that caused quite a lot of media coverage because it basically is an incentive-based program where districts would be provided with financial incentives to reopen. And he actually had the first date in the plan was February 15th, which of course no one could meet. And it requires a case rate of less than 25 100,000. but it also requires 2/3 of the legislature's approval. And what we've been hearing over the last week is the legislature is just not going for it. And all the major education organizations are opposed to it because it would take Proposition 98 money away from the schools to implement this plan. And further, it's part of the whole state budget proposal, which, as you know, has to be negotiated with the legislature, and that takes months. It's usually June when that's approved. And at this time, we're not eligible for the money, even if it were approved. So let me talk about the recommendation coming out of our planning committee, which is on the next slide. We talked about specific criteria that we would like to see met before the committee makes an actual recommendation about when to bring Gilroy Unified students back. So I'm going to read this because I know we have a lot of people out there and they probably can't read it. In accordance with directives from the California Public Health Department and the Santa Clara Public Health Department, the GUSD Reopening Planning Committee recommends that the Gilroy Unified School District remain in distance learning until Santa Clara County moves into the state's red tier for 5 consecutive days, and the case rate for Gilroy is less than 25, and this is for Gilroy, not the county. The case rate for Gilroy is less than 25 per 100,000 for at least 5 consecutive days. While in the purple tier, the Reopening Planning Committee will continue to plan for a safe return to in-person instruction and meeting the specifications set forth in the document that I've been sharing with you. When Santa Clara County moves into the red tier and remains there for 5 consecutive days, and when the case rate for Gilroy is less than 25 per 100,000 for at least 5 consecutive days, the Reopening Planning Committee will propose further recommendations in order to provide input to the GUSD Board of Education. As always, the health and safety of all staff and students remains the highest priority of the Gilroy Unified School District. So in a sense, you could look at this as an interim recommendation. Our committee is saying until we get to the red tier and until our case count drops significantly, we aren't prepared to provide a recommendation tonight on returning our students and our staff to our schools. We'll be happy to share our recommendation for how to bring students back when we get to that level. But we are so concerned about not only the case rate in Gilroy, but a lot of these other issues that are surfacing even now. There's so many issues surfacing like contact tracing, how that's going to be done. In some cases, some of the reports have recommended weekly testing of students and staff, and then just layer that with the vaccination issue. There's so many issues that are coming at us right now that need to be addressed, and certainly the ventilation issue, which we are actively pursuing. There are just many issues that need to be addressed before we can recommend that students and staff return to Gilroy schools. So that is where we are right now, and I'd be happy to entertain questions, respond to comments from the board.
I have a question.
Right.
So for, I understand schools not reopening. My question is, are we considering opening up conditioning and sports and athletics for our students, or since we're not opening the schools, it's nothing?
Thank you for asking that question. That's a rapidly developing area also. The state released some guidelines yesterday that does allow for the return to athletic conditioning, and in some cases competition, depending on the sport. So we've been talking, Dr. Padilla, the high school principals, and I have been talking about the new guidelines, and we have decided to resume athletic conditioning, and that I believe will begin February 8th. Dr. Padilla?
So it depends. We're actually meeting on Monday to look at the schedules for each school and where we will be in conditioning and where we will be in practice. And the distinction is those teams that are allowed to begin practice for competition in the purple tier, which are very limited, but include for us sports such as cross country and swimming. So we will be looking at that, and we're meeting with both comprehensive high schools with the athletic directors to look at their schedules and to give that start date for both sides.
And then as far as athletic conditioning, it's all sports, right?
Correct. It's all sports.
So when that date is selected, it'll be sometime in the next 2 weeks, then we'll resume athletic conditioning and in some very limited sports competition. And this is right out of the guidelines that were released, I believe, yesterday. In the last
night. Yes.
Couple of days. Yeah.
Yes, and we met today with both Santa Clara County Public Health as well as Santa Clara County Office of Ed to review all of the guidelines. And that's what we'll be reviewing on Monday with all of our sites.
Good. Yeah, I just heard about it Tuesday afternoon at the superintendent's meeting, and they told us about this webinar today. So Dr. Padilla rearranged her schedule and attended, which was very helpful. And I'm sure she knows the latest about athletic conditioning and competition.
Dr. Flores, one comment, if I could.
Sure.
So one comment I had also heard about competition is that and this is just kind of a warning to, or a forewarning for parents and community members, but it may be that competition wouldn't be in the same way that we've thought about it in the past, and there might be limitations on cross counties that you can't cover, and I see that like in central Santa Clara, for example, it's a non-issue kind of, but for us it is a big issue when you look at where our competing schools happen to be in cross counties. Just an FYI, basically.
Correct.
Yeah, Deb, can you address that? Because I heard that on Tuesday. Yeah.
Yes, so the county allows just kind of like with travel as well, that we can cross the county lines with adjacent counties only. So that means for us, we do compete with schools traditionally in Monterey County. We will not be allowed to do that during this time. It is only adjacent counties, and it is only one team or one cohort at a time. So our traditional meets and other things that we have for certain sports will not continue as usual. So we will have to be working, and the league is already working on this, to determine what the schedules might look like to allow for some competition. But it definitely will be a reduction in competitions as well as a change of traditional practice.
And also limitations on sports, which sports can do it.
Correct. And right now in the purple tier, it is very restrictive. And basically it is for those sports that are individual sports where they can maintain that distance with no contact. Red, and then when we get into red tier, there is a different level. Basically, we have a different sports for each level or color-coded system that we have for the state.
Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions. I noticed this is an action item. Are you requesting that we take some action on this report?
Yeah, we wanted to, we were hoping that you would take the action to support the recommendation coming from the Reopening Planning Committee.
Well, speaking for myself, I support the recommendation coming from the committee, but and thank you, and thank the rest of the committee for their work on this constantly moving target. It's almost impossible to put your head together on all these things, because the state, as you illustrated, the governor, he wants us to open our schools, but then he balks at vaccinating our employees before they're compelled to go back to work. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm going to have a hard time insisting that staff go back to work without adequate protection, and that includes vaccines, as far as I'm concerned. Other states and other areas are making their teachers a priority. And so if the state wants to ignore our teachers, fine, But as a board, I think we need to prioritize the students and the staff. And that's just me. So I support that recommendation.
And I think that on the vaccination issue, it has to be made very clear that it's not on the backs of school districts' budgets.
Right.
You know, I attended a training, on the testing and vaccination issue. The report is recommending regular testing of all staff and students. I attended a training where we were told that each test would cost between $100 and $150. Now, can you imagine districts footing that bill of having to test, even if it's once a month at $100, $150 per test? We have 11,000 students and 1,100 employees. So that's one issue. The vaccinations is definitely an issue. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to give the shots? How often is it going to be done? Right now, the report referenced weekly for districts in the purple tier. Those are major issues that have to be resolved.
Mark?
Ms. Pacino?
As the board rep on this committee, I want to, again, like Dr. Flores said, really thank everybody on here, because there is an incredible amount of information that has been coming out since last spring. And not only amount, but shifting. And the whole HVAC thing just came out in December, for example. And that was a huge change in a difference. But the slide tonight in Dr. Flores's presentation that I want people to really hone in on is the bar graph with Gilroy as the highest rate in the county. So when you look at other districts that are bringing students back, they're the ones that have the little tiny bars. And it's great that the county as a whole may be coming out of purple, but that doesn't mean Gilroy Unified is, or Gilroy as a city. And I was just listening to the news, and they were touting that districts back east, they could go back to school, and their rate in a school is equal to the rate of community of the community. Well, in our case, that's almost 12%. And are we really willing to have 12% of our kids and our staff subjected to that? So we are outliers in the county. And I take absolutely no pleasure in being number one in COVID rate in Santa Clara County. But I think we have to look at that and take care of our own, because we are an outlier in terms of the number of cases, and we cannot lose sight of that.
Question.
Nelson?
Going back to the athletic conditioning, which sports, is it all sports are going to be allowed to do that? Which sports, it's only the ones that will allow the students to socially distance themselves?
For athletic, well, let me talk about athletic conditioning. Deb went to the training, but for athletic conditioning, we did all sports, but it was not, there were no contact. So it was drills and skill development. They were in cohorts of 12, I believe. We had all these protocols that they had to follow. So that's athletic conditioning, and we are going to resume that. The actual sports that can resume, Deb, are very limited, aren't they?
They are very limited. I don't have the exact list in front of me, but I know it includes cross country, I believe golf, swimming, or water sports, as they say. I believe tennis is in that list as well. But that's pretty much all. Bowling, which we don't have. So very limited. And yes, it is truly just the individual sports where they can maintain the 6 feet distancing at all times, even in competition.
So swimming is allowed?
Water sports can open up in the purple tier, yes.
Because they're in lanes, and they, in theory, can stay. They don't. It's not like physical contact in football, for instance, or even basketball and soccer. So that's why. I'm not arguing for their list. I'm just saying that's what we're being told.
Correct. And I do not have the exact list in front of me, but I can get that for Dr. Flores to share with the board.
Mr. Pace?
So it sounds like there is some third party that's making these calls about sports. Can we overrule them if we think that sports doesn't make sense at this point?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The only reason I would suggest that we move forward with at least athletic conditioning is our track record was very good when we did it. Because remember, we started it in July and it went till December. Deb, we did have a couple cohorts that we had to shut down because of suspected COVID-19. Everyone tested negative in those cohorts. So our protocols, though, are very strict. You know that, some of you know that because your kids are in those sports. So, we have a good track record, but except for the one incidence of students off campus at parties, that shut down all the cohorts for a couple weeks. Other than that, we've had a pretty good track record. But again, this is not competition. It's skill development and maintaining their skills for their sport.
Trustee Fiak, did you have a comment?
Yes, actually, first of all, I want to thank the committee members for this thorough report and all of the work and time that they put into it. I totally support not reopening schools right now, again, just because I think we do, understanding that there is a mental health toll on our students, but we also really have to look at, the physical toll that exposing our staff and students to reopening schools. So, and because Gilroy is such a, is that outlier and we have such a high positivity rate, I think that for the sake of the safety of our students and staff, we do need to keep our schools closed for now. My question would be for this committee, the reopening committee, are you considering when we do get vaccines, what is our policy? So are we making it mandatory for all of our teachers to take the vaccine? Is it going to be optional? If they choose not to take that vaccine, what's the liability for the district?
You're raising all the same questions that we have been raising in meetings, Paul and I. Those are hot topics right now. And obviously, whatever we do has to be negotiated with our unions. And we, of course, want to talk to our unions about any decision about vaccines, whether it's voluntary or mandatory. There are a bunch of liability and legal issues involved. It's a very complicated issue. And I personally think the state needs to take the lead because if we can't, 1,000+ districts trying to figure this out is not the way to deal with a major question like, should all staff be vaccinated? And then are there even enough vaccines to do it? Listening to the governor today, it's going to be summertime before most people are vaccinated. So, there are a lot of public school employees in this state, and they would have to, right now, I don't think they have enough vaccines to even consider it. Even though we're in 1B, educators are in 1B. Those who are 65 and older, by the way, can get vaccinated now, but everyone else has to wait till we get to 1B. And 1A they're far from done in phase 1A. So there are a lot of questions about vaccines that aren't answered. You're raising questions that we've raised at meetings, and we're trying to figure it out. There are states that require it, by the way. There are other states that have figured it out and are requiring it.
Any other board questions or comments?
This is Trustee Diaz.
Yes, Trustee Diaz.
So just to kind of point out that I'm making a few comments just because I agree with everything that's been pointed out, and the data, there is no agreement with it. That is the data. There's no refuting it or anything. It is what it is. The one thing that I do want to point out is that I also looked at it and also charted neighboring cities because their numbers were lower, but then their percentage rates were lower. One thing that I do want to point out is that even though we are at 12%, it's really different if that 12% had been accumulated really early on in the pandemic period, and it wasn't. It actually was quite the opposite. About 5% or 6% was in the last couple of months, like 2 months. And in the last 2 months, Gilroy has accumulated that, accrued that 5 or 6%. So if you see it as a kind of tidal wave, that pressure is building up, and it's building up pretty intensely. There's signs of it diminishing, and that's fantastic. But the case is that in the last couple of weeks, about 1% of the population has been infected regularly, and that's quite a bit. And that's the alarming part, is what has happened in the last couple of weeks and in fact, the last 4 weeks, I think, is what really affects us. People that got infected 10 months ago may not be affecting us anymore, but the ones that have been infected in the last couple of weeks definitely do. So I appreciate all that. Just an FYI again.
Thanks.
Okay, this is an action item. I would entertain a motion to approve the committee's report.
This is Enrique. I move to approve.
This is James. I second.
We have a motion and second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Geary,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson,
Yes.
James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Pisano.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item number 7B, update on the governor's January budget proposal for 2021 to 2022. Mr. Meza.
Thank you, President Good. Good evening, board. Good evening, superintendent and members of the public. Please interject whenever you hear me, because whenever you want my attention, because I can't see all of you guys in the screen, and I'm sure that's usual for everybody. As it's been mentioned before, on Friday, January 8th, the governor released his budget proposal for the 21-22 state budget. And during his press release, the governor made it a point to note that the $85 billion allocated for K-14 education was the largest in history, right? Well, the $85 billion offers some relief in many ways, as it's been mentioned, but it also omits some critical details that brings context to the amount and really diminishes this quote unquote historic investment in education. So, let's get to the highlights for tonight. So I'll cover most important topics. Obviously, the state budget development process, as our superintendent mentioned, it is a process and it takes months. So the proposal lacks the legislative authority to actually allocate funds. So that's number one. It's just a proposal at this point. And then we'll get into the details of what this means in terms of Prop 98 funding, what it means to us as a district, most importantly, and cover the next steps. And so this slide just depicts the state budget development process, what I was referring to before. So up in the top area of the graph, you can see that where we are. Here's where we are in the state budget development process. There's been a couple of budget committee hearings on this proposal with the legislature. As Dr. Flores mentioned, key areas of the proposal have already been really received less than favorably, particularly the incentive to open schools early. Again, because the proposal needs to cycle through this legislative process. We live in a democracy after all, and there's really no appetite for the legislature to put a standalone bill and vote on that separately. They just are not willing to do that. So we expect some elements of this proposal, certain key elements of the proposal, to change by the May revision before it's enacted into law in mid-June. So this slide, I always like to put together a slide that has the dollar amounts and a little bit of context to them, just in terms of summarizing a lot. And there's a lot of bullet list here because there's just that many initiatives that the governor is putting together in this budget. The key to us, though, is the cost of living adjustment. Cost of living increase essentially is the source of new revenues. And you can see that For the current year, there's some confusion out there. For the current year, the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, is 0, and it remains 0, even in his proposal. What it does, though, is it compounds the COLA. So next year, we'll receive really, truly 2 years worth of COLA, at least is what's being proposed. But the lion's share of that COLA, the 3.84% COLA, is this year that we're not getting. So he's essentially pushing aside and delaying paying of that 2.31% COLA, adding the estimated COLA of 1.5% for next year, and that is an estimate. So the total will change, very likely will change, and we'll know that until May with the May revise. We have discussed, as Dr. Flores mentioned, the incentive, the $2 billion in-person grants. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It just has some ambitious, shall we call it, timelines that are just, quite frankly, unrealistic. There's a significant $4.6 billion one-time investment in extension of instructional time. I'll get into a little bit of detail on this and the other areas of the list. $9.2 billion in deferrals. Deferrals, again, are just cash payment delays for districts. We pay our bills on time, but apparently the state is comfortable with not doing the same. And I'll get into the areas in subsequent slide. But again, I want to highlight there is zero COLA provided to all districts in California this year. For us, it's always interesting to see is the governor and his office, the Department of Finance, in tune with what the legislative analyst is looking at, and are they really agreeing to what the state sources can and can't do? And so this basically says they're in agreement, with the exception of 3 billion or so, and really the lion's share of this is what's called a supplemental payment due to Prop 98 funding. And I'll really go into detail on that because it gives you a light and an indication really of what the governor is truly doing here. And I think it's important, and I think he'll eat away at his claim that this is a historic investment in education, and what in fact is quite the opposite. So just hold on to that and remember this $2.3 billion that's added on as a one-time investment to Prop 98. And with Prop 98, it's really K-14, right? $88 billion that he highlights for the press is quite the salesman. It's the total, right? So we have to dissect that like we're doing now and look at the K-12 share, and then furthermore, look at what the actual proposals are doing and the impact to our district. A critique of the governor and Prop 98 spending plan is that it doesn't sufficiently address deferrals. In total, almost 13 billion, right? 13 billion is still in place this year. It's a missed opportunity. To put it simply, a deferral is a delayed cash payment to schools. Again, we need to pay our bills on time. We need to pay our teachers on time, our classified staff, our paraeducators on time, our consultants on time, but the state doesn't. They defer all those cash, apportionment cash, well into a whole different fiscal year. And while despite the tax revenues exceeding expectations, that deferral, a third of it is still in place for next year. That's just a real missed opportunity. And remember that 2.3 billion that I highlighted, and I said focused on that. Here's really the disappointing element to the proposal, and one that I think really eats away at his claim of making historic investments in education, because in fact I view it as quite the opposite. Basically, under the current law, current budget, 2021 budget, it created an obligation for the state to pony up an additional $12.4 billion, $12.4 billion to education. And it did that in two elements. So it set up a target essentially to share in the revenues, which are of course based on taxes, and those are exceeding expectations to the tune of 22% this year. But it also set a benchmark so that we in education continue to grow our share of the budget as a total. Currently it's at 38%. this part would increase it to 40%. And so that's already enacted into law. Simply meeting the law and funding that is obviously a key thing, and that would be a reason to celebrate. But this proposal, in fact, turns that upside down and essentially says, yeah, I have a $12.4 billion obligation, but I'm going to settle up with a one-time $2.3 billion payment. And that's just contradictory to making historic investments in education, right? It's just not true. And so in special ed, there's some other areas, of course, that are positive. You know, the governor often references his struggles with dyslexia, as he did in the press release. Ultimately, I want to give him credit for that. He has helped with equalizing base rates across regional special ed areas. These are called SELPAs, and they're funded based on this new higher regional rate. But special ed is a severely underfunded program, severely underfunded. And it'll continue to be because the COLA of 3.84 doesn't even get applied to the little help we get from the state. It's only going to receive, according to this proposal, 1.5% increase next year. So gone is the 2.31% that we were owed this year. We'll never recover for that. He is continuing a $300 million in ongoing investments in special ed, but again, that's a state number. It gets really quite diluted really quickly. There are some other areas that he's putting forward, as mentioned in that one slide that summarizes it all. 540 million, again, one time for professional learning, teacher effectiveness, addressing the teacher pipeline. Those are all problems, but relatively speaking, these are small amounts to the entire state, and we need more. And I would argue, we would all argue that these would be ongoing commitments, not one time in nature. There's, I think, over $315 million in all these subsequent accounts that he's proposed, including a educator effectiveness block grant, which is 250 million of that 315 on the slide. But again, these are all one-time major investments, no doubt, with very little details that are forthcoming at this point. But again, all one time. Again, the teacher pipeline, I think this is 225 million between the three categories, including credentialing programs for classified workers. Again, all great things, but one time. And of course, this is meant to address the special ed shortages areas, bilingual education and STEM. Those are the key areas that are addressed in those. The proposal also makes good on a promise that while the governor vetoed Assembly Bill 1835, as proposed by Assembly Weber from San Diego, he vetoed that earlier in the year, but then he promised in doing so in his veto language that he would roll that up into the proposal, into the 21-22 budget proposal, and he's done that. And so what this is all about is that we have a share of supplemental and concentration funds that are part of our funding, and to meet the high needs of those students, English language learners, low incomes, and foster youth. And now they're looking at really rolling back, almost like treating them as categoricals, and more specifically, any carryover funds in those accounts, those sub-accounts, I think will eventually have additional oversight from the county office. And I think they're going to be treated more as categorical, heavily restricted programs. So you remember the whole funding model is called local control funding formula, which his prior predecessor, Governor Brown, championed the local control. That meant that the local boards should decide that flexibility, but it looks like we're returning to the era of categorical programs. So now let's turn our attention to the December federal stimulus that was signed into law by former President Trump on December 27th. It's huge, at one point, $2.3 trillion, called Consolidated Appropriations Act, right? It did many things, 900 billion in COVID relief package, 7 billion to expand broadband access. These are all national numbers, right? 10 billion for childcare and continue funding for school meals. On the slide here, I have the share of elementary, secondary school emergency fund for the nation. California is estimated to have to receive about 6.8 billion. Again, that's for the state. We do have an estimate for that for Gilroy Unified, which would be about 7 million. And now these ESSER funds, though, the way that the federal law allocated that methodology was based on Title I funding. Now we've already heard many superintendents and other districts talk about, well, is that really fair? Because we're all in this pandemic together. We don't qualify for Title I funding, but we all have the same challenges of bringing back schools and reopening schools, etc. So I think the legislature is probably going to hear that and have some ideas about a different way of allocating that. So I expect that 7 million number estimate for GUSD will change, because I think it will probably hold up to being that allocated based on Title I. I think it might be reverting back to average daily attendance. So I expect that number to drop, unfortunately. And the gear fund, really the governor has discretion on that. There's very little detail he has provided thus far, but it's going to be substantially less for that. So what's included in the budget is often as important as what's not included in the budget. And what's not included in the budget, of course, is a funded COLA for this year. More importantly for us, because we're a declining enrollment district, there is no extension of the hold harmless for declining enrollment districts. And I want to walk you through that very important criteria for us and what it means to us. There's no more one-time discretionary, pure discretionary being proposed. And as you all remember, during this pandemic, we've had to reach out and finally had flexibility and waiver from the state to simply pick up the phone and process lunch applications on behalf of our parents and certify that via phone call. There is no such extension. There is no such extensions of those waivers coming into next year. So that's really negative for us. And there is no COVID liability coverage, as has been mentioned in the superintendent's prior report. And in fact, rather than setting LCFF aspirational targets, has been talked about for several years, remember, we have already reached our quote unquote funding target. Rather than set an aspirational target, that was really a gimme for him. That remember that 38%, that was an aspirational target, essentially to get us to 40% of the budget. Remember, California is not, top of the line in terms of national spending in student education. So he missed an opportunity here. He should have kept that in place. In fact, this proposal is doing exactly the opposite. It is maintaining us at 38% of the budget and really removing 10 billion from that 12.4 and, providing a 2 billion one-time investment. So we just have to call that for what it is. It's not, it's falling short of his promise, I think. And so getting back to the whole harmless provisions, this slide has two key components, right? There's a cost of living adjustment that will come, doubling up that cost of living adjustment. That's important to realize. It's doubling up the effect of a cost of living adjustment in 1 year, and then before the rug is pulled underneath, right? So you'll see that graphically in the next slide. We'll get a COLA, and then the rug gets pulled underneath us because we have this whole harmless protection while we're declining enrollment. So just to walk you through it, enrollment last year was 11,135 students, excluding our charter school, right? This year's October CBETS was 10,853. That's 282 students less, roughly $2.8 million, right? And our funding stayed the same. It didn't drop. Then next year, we're not projecting here another 282 student drop, but we were declining already. We had declined over 600 students since 2016. We are a declining enrollment district, and we're projecting to decline about 150 next year. But the funded COLA, again, because of that whole harmless, stays the same. But once we get to that 22-23 year, that whole harmless expires, we lose $4 million, $4 million in one single year of ongoing revenue. And that has just is catastrophic unless we plan for that. There is a positive element to this proposal, which is that 4.6 billion At the point of submitting the board item, there weren't enough details to figure out if this allocation is going to be based on Title I or an average daily attendance. It's updated here. It's based on average daily attendance throughout California. So now it's easier for us to come up with an estimate. Should this $4.6 billion remain in the budget, in the enacted budget, and that's 7.3 million of one-time funds, right, that we will have specifically for extending learning time and academic intervention grants. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide because it shows the impact of that 3.84% COLA, right? Raising revenues in 1 year. But then the rug gets pulled from underneath us with that whole harmless expiring in 22-23. And then look at that 1 year drop. So really, you can see that the COLA, we think of the cost of living adjustment increases as being ongoing. And that is certainly true if your ADA, average daily attendance, and your enrollment stays pretty much the same. But when you have a drop, and it's going to be the feeling of a 2 year declining enrollment drop, where you've held harmless, your average daily attendance is artificially up there. We're essentially getting paid for students we don't have this year, for students we don't have next year. But then we're trued up in year 22-23. That drop, that 4 million drop, you'll feel it, and then we're on our own with minimal cost of living adjustments increase. And that's the point of why we can't set our trajectory of revenues at that peak, because simply we just don't have the students now. And there's good reason to believe, based on our trend, again, we declined 600 students, over 600 students since 2016. There's reason to believe, because of birth rates, because of low student generation rates, that that's not the case for Gilroy Unified. We're a declining enrollment district. And then furthermore, globally, looking at the state picture, remember that LAO, the Legislative Analyst Office, and the Department of Finance both agree there are looming deficits for the state in these fiscal years. What does that mean? That means that they might suspend the cost of living increases as they did this year, even though they have plenty of revenue, right? It's 22% taxes have exceeded their expectations, yet we have 0% COLA. And this is a good year, right? Relatively speaking, for the economy, relatively speaking. Yet we have a 0% COLA. So what will we see when we get to those deficit years? So that's just cause for concern. So the next steps for us, obviously, we are going to look at our enrollment projections. Our demographers will hopefully be able to present to the board on February 11th. We'll continue our efforts to reach agreement with all employee bargaining units. And then the focus on reopening is ongoing. Dr. Flores mentioned our efforts in HVAC assessments and repairs. That's going to be ongoing, and we'll be completing hopefully Gilroy High pretty soon and moving on to the 7 elementary schools as a priority. And then the May revision. Remember, I started by saying this is just the start of the budget development process. The democratic process will cycle through, get to the May revision, and even that May revision will get tweaked a little bit before it's enacted into law. We'll follow that every step of the way. We're also following Biden's American Rescue Plan. That is $1.9 trillion of investment, a lot of an education, but he has a tough hill to climb between the Senate and the Congress. In the House and the Senate, they have to agree. And then ultimately we will revise our multi-year projection with those enrollment, updated enrollment numbers. So I'll stop sharing my screen because I can't see anything else.
Amro, could you tell the board and the public how much the HVAC assessments roughly are costing us?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Flores. So initially, of course, as you know, we have not completed all the schools yet. You know, Christopher High's been done. Gilroy High's about 80% done. But just for 4 schools, it was $225,000. And that's just for the assessment pieces. The repairs on, things like economizers, etc. I'm getting too technical here for my own good. Those are extra costs. So the 225,000 for 4 schools is just to assess for our team of really 3 companies to assess and tell us exactly how to make these HVAC components work to their maximum capacity. And then we have to pay the repairs separately.
And so the point is that that could be, $1.5 million, $2 million by the time we complete the assessments and we make the repairs. And all I can say is thank goodness that those one-time funds are coming, because we can definitely utilize them for that and for things like all the 3-ply surgical masks. I mean, there's so many expenses related to the pandemic that will be charged to those one-time funds, and those one-time funds can't be used for ongoing expenses. So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Flores.
So, Mr. Meza, I have a question. Trustee Diaz here.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to deferrals, how guaranteed are they? Like, have they ever not paid a deferral? I mean, could you, for example, could you dip into reserves if you had to cover current expenses, knowing that there's a promised deferral?
Excellent question. I can go back into, 2002, 2003. I believe that's when the state said, hey, this 20%, it was 20% back then, reduction to what was called then revenue limits, came in the form of a deficit factor. And so deferrals can easily turn into a deficit factor in a heartbeat with a strike of a pen, as you're probably well aware. And so what a deferral right now is just a cash delay payment, right? What a deficit factor is I'm going to give you 80 cents on that dollar, as they did in 2002 and 2003, and then I'm going to repay you whenever I can. And it was all the way through, my goodness, I think it was 2006, 2007 or so, when we're starting to get back, and then, another crisis hit. And so it actually took until the local control funding formula in 2013 to start getting all those payments back. And so we used to call it gap funding. We're just composed of various elements. It was payments for all those cuts that we had taken, plus all those deficit factors, because every time they suspended the cost of living adjustment, suspended all the revenue that they were supposed to provide to education, we were tracking it. We, the education community, were tracking it. So that 20% cut would get tracked and eventually got paid. But boy, did we go through a generation of kids who didn't have that revenue.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other board questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Meza.
Thank you.
And I believe you're up again on number C, a resolution. It's a mouthful. $33 million in general obligation refunding bonds. And I'll let you talk about that further.
Thank you, President Good, and good evening, everyone, again. I am joined by John Isom, as you can see, from Isom Advisors. He's our financial advisor. And item 7C and 7D have one real presentation. So if the board doesn't mind, John Isom will present both 7C and 7D together. But let me walk you through what this means. Essentially, 7C is a resolution, and as you can tell by the long title, it was written by legal bound counsel, right, ORIC, that has to be precise this way. But what essentially means is we have outstanding bonds that we've issued in the past, and given the historically low interest rate environment, we have an opportunity to lower those costs for the taxpayers. And so the authorization, and this is just an informational item for today, I'll come back to you in February, but should the board approve this at a subsequent meeting, it would basically allow the district, if the savings are there for the taxpayer, to essentially execute this agreement, allowing about 3 million or so of these existing bonds, the 33 million, to be essentially refinanced to pay lower interest on those bonds. So we feel that that's a win-win because we have a transaction already in place to fund essentially the South Valley Modernization Project, which is a over $90 million issuance, which is the last series out of Measure E. So with the economies of scales of doing, one deal, right? Well, let's do 2 deals. Let's see if we can, through the economies of scale from using John Isom, our underwriters, bond counsel, etc., do these 2 transactions. They're going to be separate transactions, but effectively we are generating economies of scales. And I think that's a win-win for the district and the taxpayers, of course. So the second item 7D is purely on the issuance of that bigger bond, the last series E, for the modernization project or South Valley. So without further ado, John, please share your screen and take it from there.
Great, thanks, Alvaro. And good evening, everybody. Normally, I'd like to make the drive down to Gilroy and hang out with you in person, but obviously circumstances do not permit. If there's one thing that COVID, and I'm going to get this screen sharing working here. If there's one thing that COVID's good for, and probably the only thing, is that interest rates are incredibly low, and that's part of the reason that we have this this opportunity in front of you guys tonight. There's economic uncertainty. There is global unrest, obviously, goes without saying. There's not a lot of confidence among investors. And when investors get skittish, they want to put their money in a safe place. And school bonds, GEO bonds especially, are about as safe as you can get. So we are at the historic lows of lows. And that's what presents this opportunity that we're discussing, again, as information tonight and action potentially later. So there is one good thing. If someone wants to say COVID's the worst thing ever, it's good for nothing, you could correct them and say it's good for school bonds. Let me take you through this presentation real quick and then answer any questions that you might have. But as was mentioned, we've been in this process of selling the last series of bonds, Measure E, from the Measure E authorization, about almost $100 million. And as we were going down this process, again, rates continue to get lower and lower and lower. And as we've done traditionally in this district, as we look for opportunities to refund and save the taxpayers money. And so that's what this kind of two-parter is. So let me give you a little background on the history here of the 2 types of debt that the district has done and what exists currently and what is a potential refunding candidate and what you've already refunded. Sometimes we get the question, well, what about these other things? Can we refund those? Some of them we've already done. So if you look here, there's 2 types of borrowings. There's what's called the certificates of participation that's obligated by the general fund, but oftentimes uses developer fees here. And then there's GEO bonds. The district's voters have been very generous in supporting the district, and they approved bonds in Measure I back in 2002, 2008, and then 2016. This table below just gives you a little bit more detail as to the specific issuances and what's currently outstanding, meaning what do we still owe money on. It's here, this little blue kind of rectangle, that are the candidates for the refunding. So we had about 65 million that have been sold. We're down to about 60 million, 61. There's about 47 million that can be refunded. Some of it is kind of untouchable, so to speak. And that's what we're focusing on here. Going back to the certificates of participation, just for again, educational purposes, in 2016, we refinanced those 2008 COPs to lower the interest rates and save money. Saved about $9 million in savings for the district, and current payments are going to go through about 2039. So that was a big win, obviously, for the district in doing that refunding. The GEO bonds, there's been a lot more information or a lot more action, so to speak, on that. Again, the highlight here is the 2016. We've sold almost, 80 some million dollars. There's $94 million that remains. That's what is going to be up for issuance this year. And then again, that refunding from 2015. This is always a good bit of information to have, because people say, well, why do this refunding? It saves the taxpayers money. And the district has done an excellent job refunding when the opportunity presents itself. And it doesn't always present itself, as you can see here. 2013, we saved $12 million. 2013, a different kind of bond, we saved $50 million. 2015, little savings, but still every dollar counts, 3.8 million in savings. And then in 2019, we saved another $15 million. So in total, over $81 million is what the district has been able to save taxpayers through lower property tax payments. There's always a calculation when districts issue debt. And at the risk of getting in the weeds here, it's known as bond capacity. I think it's particularly relevant here because school districts in the state of California have a debt limit, and it's just statutory. It's 2.5% of your total assessed value. And as many of you know, assessed value is all of the value of property within your boundaries, not market value, but assessed value. And it's just a simple calculation. And in this case, if a district is going to sell bonds that exceeds that statutory limit, in this case 2.5%, you need to go get a waiver. And so you put together a bunch of information, a packet, and you have some education with the State Board of Education. And in this case, on January 14th, they approved that waiver. They said, yeah, we understand what you're looking to do. We'll let you go up to, in this scenario, 3.09%. And by doing so, we'll be able to sell the remaining 95 odd million dollars that exists from those Measure E bonds. So a little bit of an update on that bonding capacity and that waiver process and where we are in those steps of selling the remaining Measure E bonds. Interest rates, it's just crazy. They're so low. So this chart shows, essentially what the highs and lows have been all the way back to 1993. Probably the easiest way to understand it is to say this is where average interest rates are in blue. Okay, and depending on if you have a 1-year bond, a 2-year bond, a 3-year bond, you get the idea. The longer the bonds are outstanding, the higher the interest rate, right? If I bought a bond that matured in 10 years, on average, I get about 3.5% of my money. If I went out 20 years, I'd get about 4% on my money. Take a look at where we are here. That same 10 years, you tie up your money for 10 years, and you're only going to get maybe 0.8%. You want to tie your money up for 20 years, you'll get a whopping, let's call it 1.2%. So you get an idea of just how incredible the opportunity is for the district. The refinancing itself, just to give you the specifics here, a refunding is similar to just a home mortgage refi, right? You have high interest rates that exist, and you can replace them with lower interest rates. I'm going to go get a different bank with different investors who are going to lower those interest rates. The big difference here, and I think this is important, is unlike a home mortgage refi, you cannot extend the term. You don't reset the clock. Sometimes a home mortgage refi just resets for 30 years and you think you lowered your payments. Well, you did lower your payments, but maybe when it's all said and done, you're paying more, in total interest because you've extended the term. Here, we literally have to keep the exact same amount of time, in this case, the same years. So this particular set of bonds goes out to 2044. This is the old debt service, which is, hey, if we do nothing, the investors, they're going to keep earning this kind of money. Or if we do something and we refund them as we have in the past, this would be what the new debt service might look like. And I say might because until we actually lock in the sale, we cannot say with certainty what it's going to be. But this would be based on today's marketplace. And here is the taxpayer savings. So we're talking almost $125,000 pretty consistently for the next 23, 24 years. Again, presuming that the market holds and we can lock in these interest rates. So all told, it's about 2.9 million. Some of you may recall that we don't just look at it in a gross number basis. There are calculations that we use as your fiduciary to say, is this truly financially efficient? And that is what's known as net present value, or in this case, this 8.28%. The GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, has kind of set a general benchmark for municipalities to say you should be able to achieve at least 3%, maybe 5%, depending on circumstances, in order for it to be financially efficient. Otherwise, don't do it if you can't save, some minimum level percentage. Here we're at about 8.3%. So if we can hold to this, that would be fantastic. I think even if we could get to 6%, assuming interest rates crept up a little bit, that would be fantastic.
Mr. Isom?
You bet. Yes.
Does the amount you're talking about, does that take into account the finance charge that we're paying?
Yes, it does. This is net. These are the net savings to taxpayers. So this would assume whatever payments you pay for ourselves and bond counsel and underwriters, et cetera. Yep. So this is one of those things that we're going to need to monitor. It's not a guarantee. We think it's a great opportunity. We, of course, would need the board to approve the resolution and the associated legal documents when the time comes to essentially deputize us, right? Alvaro, Debbie, John, finance team, go do this. Pull the trigger if it works. Don't if it doesn't, right? If interest rates creep up too high, I'll be telling Alvaro, let's wait. Let's put it on the shelf for a little bit and come back later. But I would think it's a great opportunity, and that's why we're bringing it forward to you tonight. I touched on some of these already, but just to highlight a few of those things, as I said, the GFOA standard, first bullet point, there's something we look at also, it's called refunding efficiency. And that just simply means that we've got a little bit of negative arbitrage, meaning the cost of borrowing is going to be a little bit more than what we're earning on dollars that are in this escrow account. But we're saving so much money that offsets what is known as that negative arbitrage. And in this scenario, the escrow efficiency is 50%, which means we're saving more money than any negative arbitrage is costing us. So that's another criteria. As mentioned, board policy, you guys have established things as it relates to refunding and making sure that it is indeed financially advantageous or beneficial. We do meet all of the state laws, as I'm sure you would expect us to do. And again, interest rates have really never been better. This would be representative of the financing calendar. And this is going to kind of incorporate both elements. We talked about the refunding, but I also mentioned this new money that we're going down that path. And a couple of the highlights, we've met with the facilities subcommittee. There was some information obviously presented back to you guys back in October about the waiver. We did get the waiver on the 14th. So everything is going according to plan. Tonight is the informational meeting, and then you have in February time to take action. This batch of documents that are part for the refunding and part for the new money would be presented to you for an action item. And again, that would provide direction to us. It would provide direction to the county treasurer, the county tax collector, basically putting everybody on notice, hey, we're looking to do this. Be prepared to act on our behalf to see this through, whether it's our job as fiduciary to make sure this financially makes sense and we can get the absolute lowest cost of borrowing, or it's the county that's going to hold your money, or it's the treasurer tax collector that's going to levy the tax sufficient to make sure these are paid off. I do want to make, to that point, be very clear here that this would not result in a tax increase per se or at all, but rather this is part and parcel of the already approved tax rate that voters approve. So this is kind of scheduled along and has been all along to maintain the tax rate approved by voters. We're able to accelerate it a little bit, mostly because of assessed value growth has been solid, but most importantly because interest rates are fantastic. And so that allows for that. Just to kind of close the loop on the timeline, the county would approve the resolution after the board approves the resolution on the 23rd. Posting the POS, the preliminary official statement, is when we actually put this out to investors. And they have a few days to a week to evaluate, okay, how aggressive do I want to be in bidding on Gilroy bonds? How low, in this case, how low am I willing to go in interest rates to buy those bonds? And on March 2nd, currently is the plan, we would actually price the bonds, and that's when effectively we would lock it in. So for better or for worse, you know, we're a little more than a month out to assuring refunding savings and to locking in very low interest rates. But there's nothing really going on that would lead us to believe that there's going to be any substantive change to rates. But if there are, again, you've deputized the admin team, you've deputized your finance team, and those would be discussions that we would have with them, and they could report back to you in case there's anything that really changes seismically. And then on the 16th, 2 weeks later, money in the bank. So the district would be looking at about a $94 million or so deposit into the bank for projects. And then in the case of the refunding, that gets put into an escrow account to later refund bonds at the appropriate time. And then there's a new revised debt service schedule that the treasurer tax collector would be using in order to levy the taxes appropriately. And the disclaimer I will not read, but it is there for your information. Any questions on the presentation or specifically on those legal documents that you have in front of you?
So I have a probably dumb question, but just to make sure, is everything that we potentially could be refunding included in this? That is, are we maximizing the savings that we can get?
Yeah, no, great question. The answer to that question is yes. So if we went back to here, this debt profile, and we look at these opportunities, and if you look to the far right where it says call date, okay, there is no call date. So like the 2009, for example, is uncallable. There's hardly any bonds left. There's about 1.5 million, and those are not callable. We're doing the next two in line, okay? And the next ones aren't eligible to be refunded until 2026, 27, and 28. If you remember, we talked about negative arbitrage. In order to try to refund the bonds that are due or callable in 26, 27, and 28, we'd have to put money in an escrow account, and that money would sit there for 6 or 7 or 8 years. And there's so much negative arbitrage in that scenario. You know, we're earning 1% and it's costing us 2%, but it's over a long period of time. There's not sufficient savings to taxpayers for that to make economic sense. So yeah, so we looked at the 2017 sale and the 2019 sale that have these call dates, but I would say we're probably at 2 or 3 years out for those to make financial sense to refund as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet.
If there are no further questions or comments from the board, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Isom and Mr. Meza.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice to see you all again. Oh.
Quick comment, this is Michelle.
Trustee Nelson?
When I first saw this in the packet, my jaw dropped a little bit because each packet was half an inch thick for these two items, but gave me some interesting reading. But I wanted to compliment both of you on your presentation. It was clear. I still have some reading to do, some homework, but I thought it was very well done. So thank you for explaining that and what this was all about.
Thank you.
Just like the last time, this is not for approval, it's information. I imagine next meeting we'll see it again for approval. But just like the last time we refinanced it, I would expect to have a proviso in there with a dollar amount certain that is a go or no go point for us. So that way we know what we're actually approving.
Yes. Yeah, we had that yesterday, a bogey to kind of target, because as you saw in the presentation, 3% is a general rule of thumb. And there are unique circumstances where a district would say, I'm not going to do it unless I get 5% or 6%. There's very few circumstances, but it's happened where someone says, I'll do it for 2%. Because if I don't do it now, I will never do it. Sometimes bonds that only have a few years left. It's like, if you don't do it this year, you just won't be able to do it. Okay, then we'll take 2%. That's rare. But yeah, Mark, we can work on putting a proviso in there that puts
Great.
that you guys can all agree to and feel comfortable with.
Thank you very much. Next, we have item number E, approval of the 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023 instructional calendars and the 2021, 22, and 2022, 23 GTA certificated work calendars. Mr. Winslow.
Thank you, President Good, members of the board, Superintendent Flores. I'm here to present tonight for your approval 2 years worth of instructional calendars as well as certificated work calendars. As a reminder to the board, about 2 to 3 years ago, we as the calendar committee, and that committee consists of management as well as representatives from all of our bargaining units, wanted to get on a 2-year cycle. So we weren't doing calendars year by year. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet last year due to COVID-19. So this is a bit of a catch up for us, but we're back on track, hopefully, with 2 years worth of calendars. And so the calendar committee did meet this month and unanimously gave consent for me to come to the board and present this to the district. Just to highlight, the first day of student instruction will be planned for Wednesday, August 18th of 2021, and then the following year, also Wednesday, but August 17th, 2022. These calendars represent pretty much a rollover of last year's calendar with minimal impact. The only real move was that we did adjust one of the teacher professional development days before school starts, anticipating some professional development as we hopefully return back to classrooms. So we're asking for the board to approve both years worth of calendars tonight.
Are there any board questions or comments? Seeing none, this is, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval. Sorry.
Who was the second? Michelle moved to the second?
Sure, I'll be second.
Well, who was the first then?
That would be Linda.
That's me.
Okay. All right, very good. We have motion second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Aguirre,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson,
Yes.
James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Paceno.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item number F, approval of Dr. TJ Owens, Gilroy Early College Academy, 2021, 2022 calendar. Mr. Winslow.
Thank you. Unlike the regular calendars that we approve, GECA has to actually align its calendar to Gavilan's calendar. So unfortunately, we can't do 2-year cycles for GECA. This calendar is also developed in a separate calendar committee with Principal Flores and her team because they have some very unique circumstances at GECA. So this calendar was provided by Principal Flores as well as approved by her committee. And so tonight we're presenting and requesting that the board approves the 2021-2022 GECA calendar.
Any board questions or comments? Seeing none, this is an action item.
Move approval. This is Michelle.
This is James. I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Aguirre,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson,
Yes.
James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Paceno.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item number F. Item number AA, monthly maintenance and facilities update. Mr. Nato.
Good evening, Dr. Flores, trustees, and President Good. I will start with a quick photo presentation for you this evening. If I can get screen sharing to kick in for us. There we go. We got that up and running. Today, we're going to do a quick photo update at Brownell. And if you were not able to make the latest tour, this is the inside of our library. As you can tell, we're in the midst of moving it in. We've had some very diligent campus supervisors that have been working very hard at getting what seems like a never-ending amount of books loaded up into our library and ready for the students. So it looks a little different than that right now. I think we've got everything on the shelves full, but we still have an absolute crazy amount of books still on the floor. So there's also some filing and stuff that needs to be put in. It's very unfortunate. I really wanted to show off some of our soft seating that was installed, but we'll get that on the next tour. It's just buried behind a lot of that stuff. There's a little bit of it, but it's just not set up for you. But this is a closer look at some of the library furniture and the hard work that the staff has been doing over at Brownell. This is in the same building. This is their textbook storage room. It's absolutely gargantuan compared to the one that they had before. It's obviously rung all the way around in 3 rows down the middle with text shelving. So they're obviously loading that up as well. And this is one of our collaboration stations for the students to sit, and there'll be a monitor mounted here that they can collaborate and broadcast to. I think they did that in the old library as well, so we recreated those stations for them here. And this is the front of the servery. This is the new kitchen addition. This sits on the same footprint that the old servery, or I guess the old new servery, was attached to the MPR. This photo is taken from standing in the MPR looking into the kitchen. And this is where the students will come in from the left and the right, very much like many professional business parks have this type of kitchen setup. Each side is its own serving station. You basically walk along the buffet table there and get your selections. That's a milk refrigerator in the middle. You grab your milk and then you head back out towards the MPR and you go through the cash register operation. They can run 2 lines simultaneously. So there's that.
Mr. Nato?
Yes.
If I can interrupt you just for a second.
Sure.
Considering all the COVID-19 issues we're having today, even when we go back to school, it's not going to be over with. And so I would anticipate there's going to be some different recommendations or protocols for food service. And I've wondered if we've looked at any of those.
Well, not for this particular project. I understand that's going to probably affect every food serving entity that we have. One of the things that's nice about our current setup, it's only slightly visible here, but a lot of these units are fully mobile. So if we need to separate them further or put them out in the MPR to create larger space differentials, it's completely doable. All of these are mobile, so we can definitely move that out. But knowing that, I'll be anxious to wait direction, I think, from the nutrition department and on how those are going to move forward.
Now, do the students serve themselves, or does the staff serve the students?
I believe the staff serves the students, and again, this is getting out of my expertise for sure. But as I recollect, the student will select whatever they want, and there's usually a server behind the counter, and they will actually serve into the student's tray. Most everything that I've seen lately has already been pre-packaged. So it's been packaged and it's a handover rather than say like an open tray of hot served food. But again, way out of my expertise area. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
Naila's
Thank you.
rolling her.
But I figured we're talking about a new kitchen. It's a good time to talk about this because we don't want to throw good money after bad, right? If we're going to have to do it a completely different way. And I don't know what the right way is, but probably different than what we have been doing.
Yeah, I undoubtedly believe, now this is only set up as the current norm, as it was designed prior to COVID-19. I will say that this one is highly flexible. It's a lot like the classroom furniture. We can rotate things around. There are power outlets that can be still taken advantage of if we need to reconfigure it to accommodate a new standard.
Trustee Good, if I may help Paul a little bit, just connecting with Nilani, our Sodexo consultant, we are going to implement cards and scanners as part of this deployment already. It's planned for already. And furthermore, as Paul mentioned already, we are actively already doing this anyway in our distribution centers, but it's a grab and go. And so we haven't gotten to the point of what we're looking at to see when we're going to reopen and how we're going to do it yet. There's a lot of planning involved. So we have many different layers that we can deploy quite rapidly with our staff's help. By the way, I want to give them a shout out. Food service folks out there, thank you. You've been working your tail off since March. Thank you. We appreciate you. But they're really flexible. They're nimble enough that we can make just about anything work, as well as our custodians and our maintenance folks. We're pretty nimble. We can do just about anything that it's asked for us to do to get our kids back in the facilities.
Great. Thank you.
I'll move on. We just got a few more slides here. This, you may think this is actually Principal Laborante's home kitchen. It's not. We modeled it after his home kitchen. This is the Brownell kitchen and the prep area. This is the eastern side of it. Along the back walls will be where all the warming is. Obviously, there's 2 prep stations here, some wash basins. And this is a thoroughfare. We'll see more photos as we move through. To the right of this slide, off to the right-hand side, those are pass-through windows for serving snacks during break periods, directly out to the students in windows or with the pass-through windows. I don't think I'm missing anything there. This bay back here is all the wash basins. So this is all their wash stations, and off to the left is their refrigerator. There's both a refrigerator, a walk-in fridge and freezer on the right-hand side. And then behind us on the left is a whole dry storage that's about the same size as both the fridge and the freezer combined. And for your entertainment and some less interesting photos, Dan's up with his maintenance update.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, Dr. Flores, President Good, and school board. Thank you to Dr. Flores and Alvaro for the information they've already shared on the HVAC inspections and assessments. They've shared quite a bit of information that was very accurate. The HVAC assessment that we started on December 17th is comprised of a team of one of our prime mechanical contractors and a mechanical engineer and an air balancing engineer. So we have 3 different companies working on our HVACs. This is the team assembling. I think this is the 2nd day at Christopher High on the B building. So you can see we've got a pretty good team, including our district staff. We are using our district HVAC techs. We have 2 that are working every day with this team when they are, when weather allows. We've been out the last 2 days due to the rains. But the ventilation is the prime goal of verifying in our HVAC systems, but we're also verifying function and the controls and the air balance and zoning. So this is a complete comprehensive HVAC assessment, a bit beyond of what was recommended, but that's essential to ensure that we have a safe environment and we are introducing the most outside air possible. Gilroy High is in process. We're probably about 80% completed. short of the repairs that are needed. Christopher High is 100% short of one compressor that we are changing in-house. We happen to have it in stock. All the repairs have been completed. They were fairly minimal at Christopher. We've got some other ones at Gilroy High. They're a little more substantial, and they deal with the economizer controls. Those will be upgraded to integrate with the current EMS Pelican system. They're a Pearl economizer that are made by Pelican. They're made to work with that new system. And the benefits of that is that I will and my HVAC techs will receive in real time alerts if they are malfunctioning, and we can adjust them remotely. We will also be able to use a feature that we have not been able to use, which is available on the Pelican, which is a shelter-in-place feature where we can short-term close the outside air intake while school is still in session and the buildings are occupied. It'll be using recirculating air, but if we have a poor air quality, smoke, we can shut those off so no outside air is allowed at all. So that's a great feature that we have not been able to take advantage of before. So this is just an open view of some of the HVACs. They've taken them apart. One other thing that was a benefit at Christopher High, we've had concerns about upgrading our MERV rating on our filtration systems, on our filters. We were advised by many experts not to upgrade to what they call a MERV 13. We are currently using MERV 11, but they did air testing, air restriction testing, and the units at Christopher will accommodate a MERV 13. So when time allows and we are about to reopen, we will change all the filters, which are fresh now, to MERV 13. And we'll make the same assessment at Gilroy High and the other schools. So currently we're engaged at 4 schools, Christopher High, Gilroy High, Glenview, and Rucker, because those are the schools where we have students that we're supporting distance learning, that where the students don't have internet access and they have to use our school site to have internet access. I will be planning on going to the board on February 11th with an updated contract for further testing of all our sites, which will include, as a priority, all the elementary schools. So we've got a couple weeks left at Gilroy High. It seems like this is taking a bit, but when you look at our high schools, each high school is probably equivalent to 3 or more elementary schools. So I anticipate once we get our 4 schools done, we'll jump on the elementaries. It'll go quite quickly. We're getting better and better at this every day. We haven't run into too many snags other than we had a few holiday days out and some of the weather does impact us. But I think that's all the information I have on that. I don't know if there's any questions. I did want to also let you know, we've had some severe weather the last few days. We fared pretty well. I think we had 8 roof leak reports from yesterday to today, which is pretty good. We used to get 30 or 40 after a storm like this. One leak in particular is still under warranty, so that'll be taken care of. That's my brief update for you today.
Excellent.
Thank
All
you.
right. I think we just have 2 items left. President Good, you want me to run through the last 2 items?
Please.
Excellent. Let's see. Item 8B is the approval of a contract amendment with Colby Technologies, not to exceed $10,000. This is for the additional services that Colby Tech offers to actually do the pre-screening of our contractors. It was under my impression that I would be able to undertake this, but once I realized how many different kinds of contractors we had and how many we have due to our bond programs, it became clear that it was not something that I was able to do. Each contractor pre-qualification from our perspective would take about 3 to 4 hours, and we have at last count we have over 200 contractors, so it would clearly eat up a full FTE, and we're not that kind of department. We don't have that kind of resource. So luckily Colby does offer the service, and actually by a few in-depth conversations with them, was educated to know that we're actually getting a really good deal with their pre-qualification service, because if neighboring districts also use the same contractors and Colby has already pre-qualified them, we don't have to pay an exorbitant amount because they've already qualified them. That work's already been done. So we take advantage of that. It's kind of a neighborly thing. So after that, I did a little investigating. We have 24 neighboring districts that all use Colby. So the chances of our contractors being pre-qualified already in neighboring districts is fairly high. So that is item 8B. If there's not any board questions, I can move on to 8C.
Sounds like you can move on to C.
Okay, we'll move on to 8C. This is the approval of a contract with Dryco Construction, and this is for the additional fencing over at Gilroy High. This is actually part of the pool project. We're modifying the school entry points to the pool area itself by adding, I call them loop backs. Most people understand them to be barbed wire at the top of each one of the fenced entry points to the pool area. The barbed wire that we're proposing is not barbed wire. It's simply just loop back, so there's no barbs in it. It's just looping wire that disables your ability to climb over or through it. That'll prevent the mischievous individuals that may want to scale the fences from entering that way. We've also got a number of other small fence items that we want to take care of. We want to install fenced in storage caged in areas on the pool deck for uniform storage. That will take care of being able to lock up a lot of the pool equipment and supplies so they don't end up in the pool and they're cared for properly. It will also take care of some degrading fence that's out by the ticket booth on the outside of the pool area. There's a ticket booth and some two joining fence lines. We're going to take that out and actually just put in a drive gate. That'll help a lot with ingress and egress during football games and other events in the stadium. And I think and we're installing a drive gate for in the event that we need to bring heavy equipment into the pool area. We're just widening one of the gates that's over by the mechanical room for maintenance and any heavy equipment that's needed in the future. And I can take any questions you have on that item. Otherwise, I will entertain a vote for items 8B and C.
Linda, move approval.
Is Enrique, I second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Melissa Aguirre,
Yes.
Enrique Diaz,
Yes.
Mark Good,
Mark,
Twin
you're-
Fioc. Sorry,
Yes.
thank you. Twin Fioc,
Yes.
Michelle Nelson,
Yes.
James Pace,
Yes.
Linda Pisano.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we have item number 9, board member reports. Are there any board member reports? Trustee
Michelle.
Nelson.
Just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Flores and the principals for allowing me to accompany her on the APS visits to El Roble and Elliott. Other people have complimented the teachers, but it's really amazing that the teachers have been able to accomplish as much as they have. When I retired, I was just getting the hang of Google Classroom, and the learning curve was huge for me then. So I really understand and can sympathize with the teachers under these circumstances. Kudos to all the teachers in the district. I also visited GECA virtually and visited some classes there. And tomorrow I'm going to participate in the interviews for the incoming freshman class. And I'm going to do that again on February 5th. So that'll be a new experience. Met with the Luigi Aprea principal Monday and popped into a few classes. So I'd like to continue doing that. Tuesday, I'm going to go back to Elliott and visit at least one classroom to watch these SEAL strategies. So I had a lot of questions about how it's different from old strategies. So I'm going to stay for the whole visit. And I know all the second grade teachers there, so it'll be good. They don't mind me watching, and so hopefully I'll learn something. So yeah, I retired, but I don't know what happened here. I joined the board, and there you go. All my days are full now.
Join the club, Michelle.
Okay. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Any other board member reports? Seeing none, hopefully I'll see some of you at the GECI interviews tomorrow. Item number 10, upcoming and new referral agenda items. Anybody have any new or referral agenda items? Trustee Fiak.
I remember, I think it was my first year as a trustee, we received a report on the computer science program at Christopher, as well as the medical sciences at Gilroy. And either it could be a presentation or a Sunday report, but what I would like to know is the demographics of the students enrolled in those courses.
Okay.
And I would add gender as well.
Sure.
Any other referral items?
Do that one. This is Michelle. So I emailed 2 things that I was interested in. Is that what I was supposed to do?
Actually, this is the place for that. And so the procedure is, if you have one, you bring it up at this point in the board agenda, and then you follow it up with something in writing, detailing exactly what you're talking about. So if your emails have the details, then this would be the next step.
Okay, so the email was basically like to see the results of the survey done for the professional development sessions from last Friday. And I want to know who was involved in the design of the Brownell campus, particularly the science rooms, and who is going to be involved in the design of the South Valley campus, particularly the science rooms. So being as a science teacher, I would like to ensure that the science teachers have some input into the actual design of the room, so that there's enough space for lab activities, because the current configuration at Brownell allows for half the class to do the lab and the other half sits in the seats, whereas previously, and at Christopher and Gilroy High, you have the classroom configuration and then you have the lab configuration. So the room that I designed at Brownell, room 21, had the class and then it had the lab stations, and there was plenty of room for 32 students. So that's a concern I have, and I just want to make sure that we're proactive. I'm just curious to see to what extent the teachers are going to be involved in the design, because they're the ones who are going to have to live through that. And I don't know how well it's going to work at Brownell because they're not there right now. But when I saw the classroom, I envisioned that there would be an issue with everybody doing a lab activity at the same time. It just wouldn't be possible. So that's it. And then you have my email, and I'm done with that.
I'd like to respond to your request about professional development surveys. And I think we have to be careful. I went through our board bylaws, and board bylaw 9005 under governance standards, number 7, says, understand the distinctions between board and staff roles and refrain from performing management functions that are the responsibility of the superintendent and staff. And I think that gets into micromanaging in terms of looking at surveys from staff. That's what, as a board member, we give that responsibility to the superintendent and staff, and it's not our responsibility. And I'm really careful about micromanaging. I retired early because of a micromanaging board, and we lost the entire district office and 4 principals as a result of that. And we will very quickly, no, I take that back. Eventually, we will be hiring a new superintendent. And if this board gets into micromanaging, we will have no candidates. And the admin pools that we have seen in the last 2 years have been very shallow. And we need to be really cognizant of that and basically stay in our lane as board members. I think that's really, really critical, especially for the next couple of years. That's where I am.
Any other new referral items? All right. Announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Thursday, February 11th, 2021 via teleconference. Closed session will begin at 5:30 p.m. followed by the regular meeting at 7 p.m. The agenda will be available on the district's website by 5 p.m. on Friday, February 5th. Thank you very much, everybody. And this meeting is adjourned.